Arizona is known for its endless deserts, rugged canyons, and winding roads that disappear into the horizon. But hidden among its highways are stretches where the living dare not linger. Here, shadows move along the asphalt, headlights appear without vehicles, and the cries of phantom travelers echo in the night. Tonight, we will explore 25 of Arizona's most haunted highways, where spectral cars drift silently, ghostly figures walk the road, and travelers vanish without a trace. Each highway carries a history of tragic accidents, unsolved disappearances, and spirits who continue their journeys long after death. As you drive these roads, keep your eyes open. The wind may carry whispers, the desert may hide figures waiting silently by the roadside, and the stretch of asphalt ahead may be traveled not only by the living, but by those who refuse to rest. Route 66 in northern Arizona is more than a nostalgic highway. It is a place where the past refuses to loosen its grip, where ghost stories cling to the asphalt like dust from the desert winds. Travelers who drive this stretch at night often speak of an atmosphere unlike anywhere else on the historic road. The land around them feels ancient, timeless, and strangely watchful. The stars overhead seem brighter, but the shadows between the cliffs grow deeper. And as engines hum along the lonely highway, many say they are not truly alone. For decades, this part of Route 66 has been a gathering ground for stories of phantom hitchhikers, ghostly wanderers, and driverless vehicles that appear and vanish without a trace. Locals know the legends well, repeating them with a mixture of pride and unease. Even those who claim not to believe admit that something strange lingers out there. Something that walks the old road, following the echoes of travelers who never reach their destinations. One of the most common reports comes from drivers crossing the long, empty stretches between Flagstaff and Kingman. They describe seeing a lone hitchhiker standing at the roadside, always a man, tall and slender, wearing an old-fashioned jacket and holding a small suitcase. His head is usually bowed, as if he is studying the cracks in the pavement or reading something only he can see. Some drivers say they slow down out of instinct, but before they can stop, the figure simply fades into thin air. Others insist they saw him raise a hand, silently asking for a ride, only to vanish as the vehicle passed. No one has ever spoken to him. No one has ever picked him up. And yet, he continues to wait, night after night, as though stuck between worlds. Another chilling tale involves the sound of footsteps along the highway. Many travelers who pull over to rest report hearing someone walking around their car, pacing slowly, as if inspecting them. They look outside, but no one is there. The footsteps stop when the headlights illuminate the darkness, only to resume the moment the lights are turned off. Some describe the steps as heavy, deliberate. Others say they sound bare, almost fragile. In every case, the unseen walker disappears just as suddenly as he appears, leaving behind nothing but a trail of unease. But perhaps the most unsettling stories come from those who encounter ghostly vehicles on Route 66's northern stretches. Drivers report seeing headlights behind them, bright and fast-moving, as though another car is about to catch up. They brace themselves for the rush of someone speeding past, but it never happens. Instead, the lights suddenly vanish, dissolving into the night air. Sometimes they reappear miles ahead, hovering on the horizon like floating orbs before flickering out again. A few witnesses have even claimed to see an entire car, an old model from the 1950s or 60s, gliding silently along the road with no driver behind the wheel. These reports are frequent enough that locals refer to it as the ghost car, a relic of Route 66's golden age that never stopped its final journey. One well-known story tells of a traveler who stopped at an old gas station near Seligman late one evening. He needed fuel and a moment to stretch his legs. The station was small and quiet, its lights flickering with a soft hum. As he got out of his car, he noticed another vehicle pull in a classic convertible, shining like it had just rolled off a showroom floor, but it stopped at the pump with no driver. The traveler watched in bewilderment as the engine idled smoothly, exhaust drifting into the cool night air. After several seconds, the convertible rolled forward, turned onto Route 66, and glided away into the dark. When the man told the station attendant what he had seen, The attendant simply nodded and said, "He comes by sometimes, never stays long." There are also stories of voices carried by the desert wind, soft whispers that seem to drift right through the open windows of passing cars. Some travelers hear their names being called, though no one is nearby. Others hear frantic pleas for help from people they cannot see. A few have even heard laughter, faint and distant, as though a group of travelers from another time is still enjoying their eternal road trip. These moments are brief but unforgettable, leaving those who experience them with more questions than answers. The land itself seems to contribute to the supernatural atmosphere. The desert is vast and quiet, its emptiness magnifying every sound and shadow. Old motels, abandoned diners, and shuttered trading posts line parts of the route, frozen in time, their signs creaking in the wind. Many say these remnants of the past hold memories that refuse to fade. After all, Route 66 once carried countless lives, dreams, and tragedies across the American West. Some believe the highway still remembers them. Despite, or perhaps because of its eerie reputation, northern Arizona's stretch of Route 66 draws curious travelers from around the world. Some come seeking thrills, hoping to glimpse a ghostly hitchhiker or a driverless car. Others come to experience the quiet solitude of the old road, to feel the weight of history pressing gently on their shoulders. And a few come simply to listen, to let the wind tell its stories of a time when Route 66 was alive with endless movement, laughter, and hope. Yet no matter why they visit, most leave with a lingering sense of mystery, to find themselves glancing into their mirrors a little more often, listening for footsteps on the pavement, or wondering if the headlights in the distance belong to someone or something from another era. Because on this stretch of Route 66, the line between the living and the dead feels unusually thin, as if the highway itself invites both worlds to travel side by side. And so, the legends continue to grow. Phantom hitchhikers still waits beneath the desert sky. Ghostly cars still glide silently through the night. Footsteps still follow travelers who stop along the empty road. Route 66 in northern Arizona remains a place where the past whispers through the darkness, reminding all who passed that some journeys never truly end. S89, near the desert town of Page, Arizona, is a highway that feels suspended between worlds. The air is dry, the night sky enormous, and the barren landscape seems to stretch endlessly toward distant cliffs. Travelers often describe the drive as hauntingly beautiful. But beauty alone doesn't explain the lingering sense of being watched that settles over this part of the road after sunset. For generations, locals have whispered about strange occurrences on this lonely stretch, shadowy figures crossing the highway, phantom travelers appearing out of nowhere, and mysterious footprints in the sand that fade moments after they're noticed. Those who live in Page know the stories well. They warn newcomers not to drive US 89 too late or too alone. The desert, they say, remembers the people who have walked it, wanderers, lost travelers, and those who disappeared without a trace. Over time, these spirits seem to have made the highway their path, a place where they can replay their final journeys beneath the wide Arizona sky. One of the most commonly reported phenomena involves shadowy figures crossing the road in the dead of night. Drivers often slam their brakes, convinced a real person is stepping directly into their headlights. But when the dust settles, the figure is gone. Sometimes the shadow appears only for a heartbeat, slipping from the shoulder of the road into the gloom beyond. Other times it stands still, as if waiting for something or someone. A few drivers insist the figures look solid, so real that they swear they saw clothing, the outline of a backpack, or even the glint of eyes. And yet, when they pull over to look, there is nothing but silence and the low hum of the wind. A well-known story comes from a trucker who had been driving US 89 for nearly 20 years. One moonless night, he saw a man walking the shoulder, waving both arms like he needed help. The trucker slowed, rolled down his window, and was about to call out when the figure dissolved into the air like a plume of smoke. Shaken, the driver pulled over and inspected the sandy ground. He saw clear footprints, deep, fresh, unmistakably human. But, as he watched, the prints faded. Within seconds, they were gone. erased as though the desert refused to hold on to them. Stories like his are common. Travelers stop to investigate what looks like a stranded hiker or a broken-down motorist, only to find nothing but faint tire tracks circling uselessly in the sand. The tracks look real enough at first, crisp impressions, fresh edges, the kind of marks a vehicle would leave if it had recently pulled aside. But just like the footprints, the tire marks dissolve. Some vanish slowly, fading into the earth. Others disappear in an instant, as if swallowed by the desert itself. Locals tell of one particular phantom traveler who appears more often than the others. She is described as a woman in her 30s, wearing a sun-faded jacket and carrying a canvas bag slung over her shoulder. Witnesses always mention how determined she looks, walking swiftly alongside the highway, her gaze fixed straight ahead. Drivers who pull up beside her report that she continues walking without noticing them. Those who step out of their vehicles say she turns to look at the man, then vanishes, leaving only a swirl of dust. Some believe she was a hiker who went missing decades ago. Her story lost to time, but her spirit unwilling to stop searching. As they rounded a bend, they saw what looked like a small group of people walking across the highway. Their silhouettes were sharply defined against the headlights, 3 figures, all moving in unison. The couple slowed, expecting the group to clear the road, but the figures reached the center line, paused, and then blinked out of existence. The couple slammed to a halt, their hearts pounding. When they got out to investigate, they found not a single footprint. Instead, they found tire tracks crossing the road at a strange angle, as if a vehicle had veered sharply. Within moments, the tracks evaporated into the dust, leaving the road smooth and untouched. Some believe the phantom travelers are the remnants of people lost in the harsh desert around hitchhikers who wandered too far, motorists who ran out of fuel, or explorers who underestimated the landscape. Others say these figures stretch much further back into the past, to ancient travelers who crossed the region long before the modern highway existed. The land around Page is rich with history, from early settlers to Native American tribes who lived in the area for centuries. Their stories, struggles, and journeys may have seeped into the earth, echoing forward through time. What makes US 89 near Page so unnerving is not just the sightings, but the silence that follows them. The desert here is vast and empty, absorbing sound and leaving travelers alone with their thoughts. Even the wind seems cautious, whispering softly across the open plains and weaving through the rocks. In that silence, the mind becomes alert, senses sharpening to every flicker of movement or shift in light. Many drivers report feeling watched, as though unseen eyes follow their progress from the cliffs or the sagebrush. Others describe a sudden drop in temperature, a chill that grips the air even on warm summer nights. Despite the fear these stories evoke, the highway remains a vital route for locals and tourists alike. Travelers pass through on their way to Horseshoe Bend, Lake Powell, and the Navajo Nation. Yet most who drive the road at night find themselves glancing into their rearview mirrors more than usual. They scan the shoulders of the highway for unexpected shapes. They listen closely to the sound of their tires on asphalt, wondering if the faint crunch they hear belongs to someone or something walking nearby. The desert around Page is still, ancient, and deeply mysterious. It holds memories in its sands, but it reveals them only in fleeting moments. Shadowy figures crossing the road, phantom travelers who vanish when approached, tire tracks that appear and disappear like mirages. US 89 remains a place where the line between the living and the lost feels thin, where travelers moving through the night may glimpse echoes of those who came before, still journeying, still searching, still walking beneath the endless Arizona sky. Interstate 17, the long ribbon of highway stretching between Phoenix and Flagstaff, cuts through some of the most dramatic landscapes in Arizona. What begins as scorching desert slowly climbs into forested slopes and cool mountain air. It is a road of changing temperatures, shifting elevations, and, according to many travelers, strange encounters that defy simple explanation. For decades, I-17 has been associated with ghostly vehicles that drift silently beside motorists, disembodied cries that echo through the night, and mysterious figures walking along the asphalt as if trapped between one world and the next. The stories start just north of Phoenix, where the city lights begin to fade and the desert takes over. Drivers heading uphill toward Black Canyon City often report seeing vehicles traveling alongside them without any sound. These phantom cars keep pace for several seconds, sometimes minutes, before sliding backward or forward and then dissolving into the darkness. No tire noise, no engine hum, no reflection in the mirrors, just a silent presence gliding over the pavement. Some describe the vehicles as older models, cars from the 1960s or 70s with boxy frames and faded paint. Others insist they've seen modern SUVs and pickup trucks, perfectly intact but entirely hollow, as if no one is inside. One particular stretch between Anthem and Sunset Point is notorious for such activity. A commuter once shared how he saw a silver sedan drifting in the next lane, matching his speed exactly. When he glanced at it, expecting to see a driver, he saw nothing. The seats were empty, the windows dark. As he accelerated in panic, the sedan kept up effortlessly before vanishing into the black expanse just ahead. He pulled off at the next rest area, shaken, and found another traveler who had seen something similar only weeks before. But ghostly vehicles are only one part of I-17's eerie reputation. Many who drive the highway at night report hearing faint cries, as though people are calling for help somewhere just beyond sight. These cries seem to come from the surrounding desert or from inside the car itself, even when the windows are shut tight. The voices are often described as desperate pleading, frightened, or confused. Long-haul truckers, who know the road better than anyone, say they have heard whispers or low moans echoing through their cabins with no identifiable source. Some have even pulled over, convinced someone was trapped beneath their rig or hidden along the shoulder, only to find nothing waiting in the darkness. A trucker's tale from the 1990s remains one of the most haunting. He was making the climb toward the Mogollon Rim when he suddenly heard a woman crying, her voice trembling with fear. She sounded as if she was sitting directly behind him in the sleeper cab. He stopped immediately, grabbed a flashlight, and searched every inch of his truck. When he found no one, he checked the highway behind him. There were no headlights, no broken-down vehicles, no sign of anyone at all. The cry continued for a few seconds more, softening into a whisper before disappearing entirely. Many locals believe these voices are remnants of the tragic accidents that have occurred on Interstate 17 over the years. The steep grades, sharp turns, and sudden weather changes create dangerous conditions, especially in monsoon season or during winter storms. Some say the spirits of those who lost their lives on the highway linger there, wandering the asphalt and calling out to those who pass by. Others think the land itself, ancient and sacred in many places, holds echoes of past travelers long before the highway was built. The sightings become even more unsettling as the road nears Camp Verde and continues north into the higher elevations. Drivers frequently report seeing lone figures walking along the shoulder, sometimes in the middle of the lane. These figures appear suddenly solid, lifelike, unmistakably human. But the moment the headlights fully illuminate them, they vanish. Many describe them as wearing outdated clothing, flannel shirts, torn jeans, long coats, or even old Western-style garments. One couple traveling to Flagstaff shared their encounter with a man walking straight down the center line. He wore a dark jacket and carried something in one hand, possibly a lantern or a bag. As their car approached, they slowed, expecting the man to step aside, but he did not. Instead, he looked directly at them, his face expressionless, and then dissolved into the pavement as their headlights reached him. When they stopped to check the road, there were no footprints, no debris, nothing but the quiet hum of the wind sweeping across the highway. Winter nights near the higher elevations bring their own unique atmosphere. When fog settles between the pines or snow begins to fall, visibility drops to a handful of feet. In these moments, drivers often report shapes moving between the trees, following the highway's edge. Some see fleeting silhouettes slipping between branches, while others glimpse figures standing still, watching silently as cars pass. These sightings are brief, but leave an impression that lasts long after the drive is over. Another chilling story comes from a family returning from Phoenix late one night. As they climbed toward the rim, they spotted a small child standing on the roadside. The child appeared lost, shivering in the cold. The family pulled over immediately, but within seconds, the figure was gone. There were no footprints in the snow, no trail leading into the woods, no sign that anyone had been there at all. The family reported the sighting to authorities, who searched the area and found nothing. Interstate the 17th of May be a vital link between Phoenix and Flagstaff, but it is also a place where the living and the dead seem to cross paths. Ghostly vehicles drift silently through the night, cries of unseen passengers echo against the canyon walls, and lone figures walk the asphalt as if retracing lost journeys. Whether the legends are tied to past tragedies, ancient spirits, or the mysterious desert itself, the stories continue to grow with every passing year. Travelers who drive I-17 after dark often leave with a lingering sense of unease, glancing at the empty lanes beside them, listening closely to the whispers carried by the wind. And as long as the desert keeps its secrets and the mountains watch from above, Interstate 17 will remain one of Arizona's most haunted and unforgettable roads. State Route 88, winding out of Apache Junction and cutting deep into the rugged wilderness of the Superstition Mountains, is known for its dramatic scenery and unforgiving terrain. Sheer cliffs rise sharply from the roadside, desert winds sweep across the pavement, and at night the silence grows so complete that even a single gust of wind feels like a whisper. But this lonely stretch of road is known for something far more unsettling than its remote beauty. For generations, travelers have encountered phantom hitchhikers, spectral figures who appear on the roadside, wave desperately for help, and then vanish into the desert sands before anyone can reach them. The stories begin near the outskirts of Apache Junction, where the last traces of city lights fade and the desert opens into vast emptiness. Drivers often report seeing someone standing by the road just as they leave town, usually a solitary figure dressed in worn clothing. Their silhouette appears only in the periphery of headlights, a shape that seems both familiar and out of place. Some say the hitchhiker raises an arm, slowly, almost pleadingly, as if asking for a ride. But the moment the driver slows or tries to pull over, the figure dissolves, leaving nothing but swirling dust and the faint echo of footsteps that vanish as quickly as they came. One of the most frequently described figures is a young man wearing a backpack and a faded desert jacket. Travelers say he looks distressed, his posture tense as he waves for cars to stop. A retired couple driving home one evening swore they saw him twice, once on their way out toward Canyon Lake and again hours later as they returned. The second time, he stood in the exact same spot, motionless except for the small lift of his hand. When they pulled over, he drifted backward into the desert, disappearing as though swallowed by the night. They later learned others had reported the same man over the years, always standing near that same bend in the road. Occasionally, drivers claim to see her footprints in the sand, delicate and clear, but as soon as they step closer, the prints scatter as if the ground is erasing them. State Route 88's phantom hitchhikers are not confined to a single location. The road twists through miles of desert landscape, and nearly every mile holds its own story. Near Tortilla Flat, several hikers have reported seeing a man waving from the side of the road at dusk. He appears thin, almost gaunt, with clothes that look decades old. The moment they call out to him, he vanishes. Some hikers have even followed the footprints he leaves behind, tracks that seem fresh and distinct, only to watch them fade into the sand moments later, as though the desert refuses to hold on to the memory. One chilling account comes from a motorcyclist who was riding late at night, the moon bright overhead. As he approached a narrow stretch of road bordered by rocky cliffs on one side and open desert on the other, he spotted a woman standing directly in his lane. He swerved hard, fearing he was about to hit her, but instead of impact, he felt nothing. When he stopped and looked back, the road was empty. No woman, no footprints, no sign anyone had ever been there. Still shaken, he continued riding, only to see her again farther up the highway, this time standing on the roadside, lifting one arm as though signaling him. He didn't stop again. The residents of Apache Junction have grown accustomed to hearing such stories. Some believe the phantom hitchhikers are tied to the perilous history of the region. The steep cliffs, narrow turns, and sudden drop-offs along State Route 88 have led to countless accidents over the decades. Before the road was paved, it was a treacherous trail traveled by miners, explorers, and settlers. Many who ventured into the Superstition Mountains never returned. Their disappearances remain unexplained, fueling speculation that the spirits of the lost still walk the desert, searching for a way home. There is also the legend of the lost Dutchman's gold mine, a mysterious treasure hidden somewhere in the Superstitions. Many who searched for it vanished without a trace. Some locals whisper that the phantom hitchhikers are echoes of those gold hunters forever wandering the desert, attempting to retrace the steps that led them astray. Others believe the spirits are travelers from more recent times, victims of car accidents, or hikers who succumbed to the brutal desert conditions. Their presence may be a lingering imprint on the road, a restless memory replaying itself. Travelers who encounter these figures often describe a peculiar sensation accompanying the sightings. Some feel a sudden drop in temperature, even on warm desert nights. Others report a strange heaviness in the air, as if the atmosphere thickens the moment the phantom appears. There are accounts of radios crackling with static, headlights dimming momentarily, or engines sputtering without reason. Yet once the figure vanishes, everything returns to normal, leaving only the lingering chill and a racing heartbeat behind. Despite the unsettling encounters, many still venture along State Route 88 for its breathtaking views and rich history. But those who drive it after dark often find themselves glancing nervously at the roadside, half expecting to see someone standing there. The desert seems to watch every traveler, silent and patient, and every so often, it reveals a glimpse of those who still walk its sands long after their time has passed. On this lonely stretch near Apache Junction, phantom hitchhikers remain a haunting reminder of the desert's unforgiving nature and its deep, unspoken mysteries. They appear suddenly, wave for help with silent desperation, and vanish before anyone can reach them. Whether lost souls, echoes of the past, or manifestations of the desert itself, they continue to walk State Route 88, waiting beneath the stars for travelers who dare to look their way. I-60, winding between the rugged Arizona towns of Globe and Miami, is a highway steeped in dust, history, and an unsettling sense of the uncanny. The road skirts rocky cliffs, dips into narrow canyons, and runs alongside abandoned mining sites that once bustled with workers. At night, the desert quiet deepens, the sky grows impossibly dark, and the highway becomes a corridor where strange phenomena are said to unfold. Many who drive this stretch after dark speak of shadowy figures crossing the asphalt, ghostly silhouettes moving silently through their headlights. Others report cars drifting toward them, with no drivers inside, peering out of nowhere, and vanishing the moment a collision seems inevitable. For travelers familiar with the stories, the haunting begins just outside Globe, where the first winding turns of the highway press close to the canyon walls. Drivers occasionally glimpse movement along the shoulder dock forms, slipping between rocks, figures that appear only long enough to stir a sense of dread. Some say these shapes resemble people. Others describe them as tall, thin shadows with no distinct features. The moment a driver slows down or turns their lights toward them, the figures dissolve into the surrounding darkness, as if they were never truly there. One well-known account comes from a paramedic who often drove US 60 at night. While heading home after a shift, he spotted what looked like a man crossing the highway up ahead. The figure moved slowly, almost drifting, its outline barely visible. The paramedic hit his brakes, expecting the figure to react, but it kept walking, unbothered by the oncoming headlights. When the vehicle was only feet away, the shadow melted into the road itself, leaving the paramedic shaken and confused. He stopped, got out, and scanned the area with a flashlight, but the desert was silent. No footprints, no movement, no trace. But the shadowy figures are only part of the mystery that clings to this stretch of I-60. Equally terrifying are the stories of driverless cars, vehicles that glide along the highway with uncanny smoothness, appearing suddenly behind or beside unsuspecting travelers. Many describe these encounters as moments of absolute panic, where an oncoming vehicle drifts into their lane, its headlights bright and its path unwavering. Drivers instinctively swerve, bracing for impact, only for the phantom car to vanish into thin air. Near the Miami city limits, one man recounted his midnight drive home after visiting relatives. He noticed lights approaching rapidly in his rearview mirror. The vehicle behind him drew close its headlights, glaring as it drifted toward his lane. He moved to the shoulder, heart pounding, expecting to be stopped. Instead, the car behind him slid past, silent and swift. That was when he realized there was no driver. The windows were empty, the cabin dark. Moments later, the vehicle evaporated into the night, leaving nothing behind but the echo of rushing wind. Another driver, making the trip from Globe to Miami on a fog-covered night, reported seeing a pickup truck veering toward him from the opposite lane. He swerved violently onto the shoulder, certain the truck was about to hit him. But as soon as his tires hit the gravel, the truck blinked out of existence, leaving him shaking and gripping the wheel with frozen hands. When he turned his car around to look, the highway was empty, the air utterly still. Local residents have grown accustomed to tales like these, passing them down through generations. Some believe the ghostly vehicles are tied to the many mining accidents that plagued the area in the early 1900s. Miners often traveled the roads in the dead of night, exhausted and eager to get home. Many never made it. Their last journeys, locals say, play out again and again in these phantom encounters, driverless cars retracing the path of their final moments. Others point to the numerous accidents that have occurred on US 60 over the decades. The roads, sharp curves, narrow shoulders, and sudden dips have claimed many lives. According to some, the lingering energy of these tragedies has left an imprint on the highway, creating ghostly echoes that repeat themselves without warning. It is as if the road has absorbed the memory of every crash, every collision, every final breath taken beneath the desert sky. Shadowy figures are also deeply rooted in the cultural history of the region. Some locals believe the apparitions come from the souls of lost workers who roamed the mines and surrounding canyons. Others connect them to older legend spirits of ancient travelers who crossed these deserts long before the highway existed. The land around Globe and Miami holds countless stories of loss, struggle, and disappearance. The shadows that cross the highway may be echoes of those who once walked these lands, forever caught between worlds. Travelers often report strange sensations during their encounters, sudden drops in temperature, the feeling of being watched, or an overwhelming pressure in the chest. Some notice their radios crackling with static or turning off without warning. Others say their engines sputter or their headlights flicker, responding to something unseen. These disturbances vanish the moment the apparition disappears, leaving drivers unsure whether what they witnessed was real or imagined. Even on calm nights, when the sky is clear and the moon hangs low over the mountains, US 60 carries an uneasy atmosphere. The desert seems to hold its breath, listening. The wind whistles across the rocks as if whispering warnings in a language no one recognizes. Travelers who dare to drive the road after midnight often find themselves glancing more often into their mirrors, expecting to see headlights that weren't there before. They grip the wheel a little tighter, eyes sweeping the roadside for the sudden flicker of movement that heralds the appearance of a shadowy figure. Though the haunted tales of US 60 remain unproven, they persist, growing stronger with each new sighting. The road from Globe to Miami has earned a reputation as one of Arizona's most unsettling highways, a place where the boundary between the living and the lost is thin, and where phantom travelers reenact their final moments under the cover of darkness. For those who traverse US 60 at night, the journey becomes more than a simple drive. It becomes a passage through a landscape filled with shadowy figures crossing the asphalt, ghostly cars drifting without drivers, and the eerie stillness of a desert that remembers everything. State Route 87, the long desert artery stretching toward Payson, has always carried an air of mystery. The road cuts through sweeping landscapes of saguaros, sandstone, and open sky, a place where daylight feels endless and the nights fall hard and deep. For many travelers, The drive is just a scenic path between destinations. But for those who've ventured through after sundown, the highway holds something stranger, something that moves just beyond the headlights, racing the wind and echoing across the empty miles. Reports of ghostly motorcycle riders begin almost as soon as the desert air cools. Drivers describe hearing the distant rumble of engines long before seeing anything. The low pulse of a motor seems to roll across the highway, at first faint, then growing louder, as though a pack of bikers is closing in fast. Yet, when drivers glance in their mirrors, the road behind them remains empty, just an unbroken stretch of asphalt, swallowed by darkness. Some claim the riders appear in flashes, visible only in the split-second sweep of headlights. A traveler once recalled seeing a silhouette on a motorcycle pacing beside his car. It moved with impossible speed, gliding along the edge of the road, without the wobble or shake of a real machine. Its headlights were dark, its body outlined only by the moonlight. When he turned to get a better look, the figure dissolved like smoke. Local lore ties these apparitions to a group of motorcyclists who vanished along this very route decades ago. They were said to be experienced ridersmen who lived for long desert rides and never backed down from a challenge. One summer night, the group set out for a late run toward Payson, roaring into the desert heat with the confidence of veterans. But somewhere along the winding curves and towering cliffs, they disappeared without a trace. No wreckage was ever found, no bodies recovered, and their disappearance became another unsolved mystery carved into the Arizona desert. Residents began whispering that the riders never left the road at all, that their spirits still tear through the night, trapped between the land and the sky, forever riding a route they can't escape. One driver, a trucker named Harris, shared a chilling experience from a late-night haul up the 87. He'd been on the road for hours, guiding his rig through the gentle but relentless curves of the highway. Around midnight, he heard the unmistakable roar of engines approaching fast. The sound grew louder, filling the cab, rattling the air. Expecting a group of riders to pass him, he checked his side mirror. No lights, no movement, nothing. The engines continued to roar, rising to a deafening pitch. Then, in the glow of his headlights, shadows streaked across the pavement, elongated forms shaped like riders leaning low over handlebars. They raced ahead of his truck, weaving back and forth in a synchronized pattern, just like real bikers would. Harris hit the brakes, shaken, and watched as the shadows peeled away from the road and disappeared into the surrounding desert without disturbing a single grain of sand. Another witness, a young couple returning from a trip to Phoenix, reported hearing a motorcycle approach from behind. They could feel the vibrations in their steering wheel. The driver even moved slightly toward the shoulder to let the rider pass. But instead of overtaking them, the engine noise suddenly shifted, moving above the car, not alongside it. It seemed to hover overhead, circling, as if the unseen rider was inspecting them from the air. When the noise faded, the couple looked at each other in stunned silence, realizing they were completely alone on the road. Some attribute the phenomenon to the land itself. The desert along Route 87 is vast, ancient, and filled with more history than any single generation can grasp. Many believe the heat, wind, and endless horizon create an environment where echoes, both sound and spiritual, linger far longer than they should. The lonely expanse blurs the line between the living and the dead, allowing the past to replay itself in strange, distorted ways. Others insist the ghosts are warning signs. According to these accounts, the phantom riders appear most often on nights when danger lurks ahead: an elk standing in the road, a stalled vehicle around a blind curve, or a patch of black ice. Travelers swear that after seeing or hearing the spectral riders, something hazardous revealed itself only moments later. Whether coincidence or something more benevolent, the phenomenon has saved more than one life. One of the eeriest encounters came from a motorcyclist who rode the 87 alone during a mild summer night. He felt completely at peace until he heard another engine behind him, loud, aggressive, gaining quickly. Expecting another rider to pass, he stayed steady. But the engine never drew even with him. Instead, it followed closely, too closely, as though tailgating him. When he glanced back, He saw nothing but the glow of his own taillight reflected in the empty road. Then the sound abruptly moved ahead, surging forward, yet still with no visible motorcycle. The phantom engine continued leading him for nearly a mile before disappearing in an instant, leaving behind only the quiet hum of his own bike. He later said he felt the presence wasn't hostile, just lost, confused, maybe even trying to guide him away from something unseen. Travelers who have heard the ghostly engines or witnessed the shadowy forms say the encounters share a strange consistency. The apparitions appear confident when riding, but they always move toward the open desert, as if searching for a place they can finally rest. Yet the echo of their engines always returns to the highway, trapped in a loop of eternal motion. State Route 87 remains a beautiful stretch of road by day, full of sunlit cliffs and sweeping vistas. But when night settles over the desert and the wind carries its low, mournful hum, the highway becomes a place of restless wanderers. Phantom riders chasing a freedom they can no longer feel, their engines roaring into the darkness forever, seeking a final destination that remains just out of reach. Interstate 40 near Kingman stretches across a stark and lonely portion of the Arizona desert, where the land lies open and unforgiving, and the night sky feels closer than anywhere else. But locals know better. They say the silence is only a mask, hiding something much older, something that moves with blinding speed and whispers on the wind. For generations, people in the area have spoken about the spectral vehicles that race along this part of I-40. These aren't the normal late-night drivers or the truckers who push through long hauls. These are something else entirely: phantom cars and trucks that appear without warning, blaze past with impossible brightness, and vanish before the rumble of their engines can even fade. The stories always share the same details: 2 points of light in the distance, growing brighter and closer until they blind the observer, followed by a rush of cold air that sweeps through the vehicle as though something has just passed straight through the world around it. One of the most widely circulated accounts comes from a retired highway patrol officer named Mason. He had spent decades patrolling the area, long enough to know every bend and mile marker by heart. One night, while parked on the shoulder to monitor traffic, he noticed headlights in the distance, two white beams that seemed to be approaching far too fast. Mason prepared for a speeding vehicle, but instead of slowing down, the lights intensified, becoming almost painful to look at. He reached for his radio, but before he could respond, the lights shot past him with a deafening whoosh, trailing a burst of freezing air through his cruiser. When he pulled back onto the highway to pursue, there was nothing ahead of him, not a single set of taillights, not even dust rising from the asphalt. The vehicle had simply vanished. Mason later described the moment as standing on the edge of two worlds, feeling something that didn't belong in this one rush by him and disappear into the desert night. Another story comes from a young couple driving home from a late family gathering in Kingman. The highway was empty, the darkness pressing in on both sides as they moved steadily along. The wife dozed lightly while the husband focused on the road. Then, he saw headlights appear behind them, bright, intense, and rapidly approaching. Thinking a reckless driver was coming up too fast, he moved into the right lane to let them pass. But instead of overtaking the car, the lights suddenly swerved, zigzagging across the lanes erratically. The couple braced themselves, expecting a collision. In the moment of impact, the lights flared, and then vanished completely. The car was gone. No sound, no dust, no trace of movement. The couple sat stunned, the cabin suddenly filled with a bone-deep cold, like they had driven straight through a winter storm. The wife said she heard whispers in the chill, faint, broken words that sounded like someone calling for help from a great distance. Such whispers are among the most unnerving elements of the stories from this stretch of I-40. Travelers have marked them as soft, almost indecipherable, riding on the wind as if carried from far away. But the whispers always seem to grow louder when the cold drafts pass through, hinting at a connection between the strange bursts of icy air and the phantom vehicles often seen moments before or after. Some say these cold gusts are remnants of tragic accidents that happened decades ago, when crashes along this lonely highway were far more common. Before modern lighting, road improvements, and guardrails, the stretch near Kingman claimed dozens of lives every year. Locals believe that some spirits remain tied to the road where their lives were abruptly taken, and the spectral vehicles represent the final moments, replaying endlessly, drivers still attempting to reach safety, still speeding toward a destination they never arrived at. Truckers who travel the route nightly have their own stories. Many say they've seen the blinding headlights appear in their mirrors, racing closer, only to fade before reaching them. Others claim to have felt the cold drafts sweep through their rigs, rattling objects on the dashboard. A few have even reported hearing voices over their radios crackling, fragmented messages that don't match any channel. The voices speak in low murmurs, not quite forming words, but always accompanied by static, as though trying to break through from somewhere far beyond normal reception. One trucker, known simply as Dawson, experienced something he describes as the most terrifying moment of his life. He was making a routine haul through Kingman's stretch of I-40 when he saw a pair of headlights ahead so bright they washed out the lines on the pavement. Expecting an oncoming vehicle drifting into his lane, he braced for impact. The lights grew larger, filling his entire windshield. Then, instead of smashing into him, they passed through the front of his truck like mist. The cab went ice cold, so cold his breath fogged the air. And in that moment, he heard whispering from the passenger seat, soft, frantic, like someone trying to speak despite being submerged underwater. When he glanced instinctively at the seat beside him, it was empty. The cold faded quickly, leaving him gripping the wheel, heart racing. While skeptics argue that these experiences could be tricks of light, fatigue, or the desert's peculiar atmosphere, locals remain convinced the hauntings are real. They speak of the land as ancient and unforgiving, a place where memories linger longer than expected. The highway, they say, is a channel and open corridor where lost souls continue to travel, unaware they've crossed into something beyond life. Interstate 40, near Kingman, remains a road people respect, especially after dark. Its surface may be smooth, its lanes wide, but beneath that calm lies something unseen, something that moves faster than any human hand could steer, carrying whispers of the past and cold breaths of unfinished journeys. For those who drive the highway at night, the line between the living and the lost can disappear in an instant, blinded by headlights that never belonged to this world and chilled by the breath of spirits still racing toward a destination they will never reach. State Route 89A, between Sedona and Flagstaff, is one of Arizona's most beautiful drives, cutting through crimson cliffs, dense forests, and the twisting depths of Oak Creek Canyon. But as the sun slips behind the stone formations and the canyon sinks into its nightly shadows, the same road that dazzles visitors during the day becomes something else entirely mysterious, watchful, and unsettling. Locals say this stretch of highway carries old memories, the kind that never fully leaves, and travelers who drive it after dark often report encounters that leave them questioning what they truly saw. The road is known for its sharp curves and sudden dips, narrow bridges, and steep drop-offs that demand every bit of a driver's attention. But it's not just the landscape that startles people. It's the ghostly figures said to appear on those very bends. Many describe seeing a lone traveler standing on the shoulder, waving weakly as if seeking help. Others speak of a pair of figures, or even a group, illuminated for only a moment in the shifting light. And just when the driver slows, preparing to pull over, the figures dissolve into the misty slopes of the canyon and vanish as though they were never there at all. One of the most unsettling accounts comes from a woman named Jenna, who was returning from a late dinner in Sedona and heading back to Flagstaff where she lived. As she climbed the winding curves of 89A, she noticed a faint figure ahead, someone standing dangerously close to the edge of the road, waving their arm back and forth, assuming a stranded hiker needed help. She slowed down, but as soon as her headlights fully illuminated the figure, it evaporated into the thin canyon fog. No footsteps, no movement into the trees, no reaction at all. It was simply gone. When Jenna reached the next wide pull-off, she stopped to catch her breath. The canyon was silent, but she felt watched, as though the moment itself had seeped into the air and refused to let go. Similar stories have been told for decades, each one echoing the same details. Stranded travelers who vanish when approached. Shadowy figures standing on the blind curves, staring out across the canyon. Pale faces appearing in rearview mirrors, only to fade when looked at directly. The most unnerving part is that these figures always seem to appear at the most dangerous parts of the route, the spots where a moment of hesitation or a sudden stop could easily lead to disaster. Some locals believe these apparitions are the lingering spirits of hikers or motorists who lost their lives along the treacherous terrain. Oak Creek Canyon has seen its share of accidents and tragic falls over the years, especially long before railings and guard barriers were installed. They say the lost souls still roam the canyon, waving for help, reaching out for someone who can finally see them. Others believe the ghosts are tied to something even older, ancient tragedies. From long before the road was ever carved into the mountainside, the canyon's deep silence and shifting mists seem to hold secrets much older than the asphalt that winds through it. One night, two friends traveling from Flagstaff to Sedona to photograph the starry skies shared a story that left them rattled. As they descended the canyon, they saw what appeared to be a man standing on the inside of a curve, dressed in light clothing, far too thin for the cool mountain air. He lifted his arms slowly as their car approached, signaling as if trying to flag them down. They slowed just enough to get a closer look. In the blink of an eye, the figure stepped backward and disappeared not into the trees, but directly into the canyon wall, dissolving as though his body was made of smoke. The two friends continued driving in stunned silence, but a few minutes later, as they approached another curve, the same figure appeared again, same clothing, same posture, same outstretched arm. This time, they didn't slow down. As they passed, they saw the figure lean forward, staring directly into the car. The moment they exited the curve, the figure vanished once more. Even more chilling are the accounts of motorists who say the ghostly figures don't just appear on the road they sometimes seem to follow. A man driving late at night reported seeing someone standing at the side of the road as he rounded a bend, but moments later, he felt a presence in the back seat. He never saw anyone, but the weight shifted the car slightly, as though something had settled in behind him. The presence stayed until he reached the top of the canyon, where the air thinned and the trees spread apart. Then, as suddenly as it had come, it was gone, leaving him gripping the steering wheel with numb, trembling fingers. Drivers who experience these hauntings often describe a sudden drop in temperature, even in the heat of summer. Fog settles low across the asphalt, sometimes rolling down from the canyon cliffs like a living thing. In those moments, the road feels suspended, cut off from time and sound. It's in that quiet that the figures appear, wavering at the edges of vision, blending with the mist and the moonlight. Some residents of Flagstaff and Sedona avoid driving 89A after nightfall altogether. They say the canyon becomes restless, that the veil between the living and the dead thins along those winding curves. According to them, the phantom travelers don't appear by accident. They appear because they are trapped, eternally trying to leave the canyon but never reaching the top. Their gestures, their waves, are not warnings to drivers, but pleas for passage, for someone to recognize their lingering presence. Still, countless travelers continue to drive the route every day, unaware of the silent watchers who linger in the fog. And for those who make the journey after dark, it's impossible to shake the feeling that something moves along the canyon slopes, something that flickers in the corner of your eye, waiting for its chance to be seen. State Route 89A remains one of Arizona's most scenic drives. But for those who've witnessed its ghostly travelers, beauty is only the surface. Beneath the towering cliffs and whispering pines lies a place where time stretches thin, where wandering spirits wave from the shadows, and where the mist itself seems to breathe with memories that never fully fade. State Route 260 between Payson and Heber-Overgaard cuts through the towering forests of the Mogollon Rim, a region known for its sweeping views, dense pines, and long stretches of quiet roadway. During the day, the drive is peaceful sunlight filtering through tree branches, wildlife darting across open meadows, and the scent of pine following travelers for miles. But once night settles over the rim, the highway seems to change. The air grows colder, the silence thicker, and the shadows deeper. Many who have driven this route after sundown say the forest feels alive in a way that isn't comforting. It feels watchful, and along this remote stretch of northern Arizona highway, more than a few motorists have reported encounters with something unexplainable. The most well-known tales from State Route 260 involve phantom vehicles, cars, or trucks that appear suddenly in rearview mirrors, racing up behind travelers with impossible speed. Drivers often tense, expecting to be overtaken or forced to pull aside. But the phantom vehicles never reach them. Instead, the lights swell brighter and brighter in the mirror, closing the distance in seconds, only to vanish the moment the driver glances over their shoulder or turns their head to check the lane. No headlights, no engine, no dust. Just empty highway stretching into darkness. One of the earliest accounts came from a man named Elliot, a trucker who drove the route regularly for lumber deliveries. He was a veteran of the road, familiar with every curve and hill. One foggy night, as he headed toward Heber, he noticed a pair of headlights appear suddenly in his side mirror, too bright and too close to have approached naturally. Thinking it was a reckless driver, he braced himself, gripping the wheel. The lights raced toward him, filling the mirror in seconds. But as he prepared for the car to pass, the lights blinked out. No vehicle sped around him. No sound reached his ears. The highway behind him was completely empty. Elliot pulled off at the next turnout, trying to calm the tremor in his hands. He stepped out into the cold air, wanting to reassure himself that he wasn't imagining things. The forest around him was silent, except for a soft wind moving through the pines. But over that breeze, he swore he heard voices, faint, muffled whispers that seemed to drift from the trees themselves. He later described the moment as if someone unseen had climbed into his cab and whispered through the cracked window. These whispers are another common part of the hauntings along 200. Travelers have reported hearing the soft murmur of voices when driving through the darkest stretches of road, particularly conversations or fragments of words coming from the back seat or from an empty passenger side. Some describe it as the low hum of distant radio static. Others say it sounds more like hushed conversations between people who don't realize they've been dead for decades. The phenomenon is so widespread that locals have their own theories about who these spirits might be. One story goes back to a tragic bus accident in the 1970s, when a group of travelers were killed on a rainy night after losing control near the rim. Locals believe the passengers never fully left the road and still hitch rides with unsuspecting motorists. Another theory ties the whispers to the old mining days, when workers traveled the rim through unforgiving terrain and sometimes never made it home. The forest, they say, keeps their voices trapped between the trees. A particularly chilling encounter was shared by a young couple driving home from a weekend stay in Payson. It was late, long past sunset, and the forest had grown dense around them. The driver, Mark, noticed a truck rapidly approaching in his mirror, its headlights bright and unwavering. He mentioned it to his girlfriend, who turned around to look, but the moment she did, the truck disappeared. The road behind them was nothing but darkness. Mark shook it off as a trick of the eyes, but a few minutes later, more strange things began to happen. The cabin temperature dropped sharply, cold enough for both of them to see their breath. And then, from the back seat, they heard a faint whisper, then another, as though two people were having a quiet conversation. At first, they thought maybe the radio was picking up interference, but the whispers were too clear, too human. They turned off the radio completely. The whispers continued. As they sped up, the voices grew louder, rising to an urgent murmur. Unable to stand it any longer, Mark pulled over at the first turnout he could reach. When they stopped, the voices faded instantly. The cold vanished just as quickly. They sat in silence for several minutes before gathering the courage to continue the drive. Not all encounters are as intense, but many people report feelings of being watched, especially on the long, empty stretches where the trees seem to close in around the road. Some mention seeing figures standing between the trees, just beyond the reach of the headlights, never moving, never approaching, just staring as the cars pass. Others have claimed to see a shadowy silhouette sitting in the back seat reflection of their mirror, only for it to disappear when they turn around. Old-timers in Hibarova Guard often warn newcomers about driving the route alone at night. They say the forest remembers, that the highway collects echoes of past tragedies. Sometimes, they add, those echoes try to reach out, attempting to return to a world that moved on without them. Despite the hauntings, State Route 260 remains a vital artery through the mountains. Every night, countless travelers make the journey, unaware of the silent passengers drifting alongside them. US 191 in northern Arizona cuts through some of the most remote and haunting stretches of high desert in the southwest. The land here feels untouched, ancient, and vast miles of ochre earth, rugged mesas, and wind-swept basins stretching out toward distant horizons. By day, the desert radiates heat and stillness. But at night, something changes. The silence grows heavier, deeper, almost expectant, as though the land itself is holding its breath. Travelers who cross this lonely route after dark often report unsettling encounters, figures walking along the roadside, cars gliding across the asphalt without drivers, and strange movements in the sand that vanish long before they can be investigated. The most common tale involves the wandering figures, a series of shadowy silhouettes seen drifting through the desert beside the road. Drivers say these figures appear suddenly, illuminated by headlights, for only a fleeting moment before slipping back into the darkness. Some appear to walk with purpose, while others drift aimlessly, as if searching for something lost long ago. A few travelers describe them as wearing outdated clothing, their forms vague, almost translucent. But the one detail nearly every witness agrees on is this: when the figures turn toward the road, their faces are never visible. They seem faceless, hollow, like beings caught between worlds. One of the most memorable encounters came from a man named Daniel, who was driving north toward Utah after visiting family. The night was clear and moonless, the stars sharp against a dark sky. As he rounded a gentle curve, his headlights swept across what appeared to be a person walking on the right side of the road. The figure wore a long, dark coat and moved with a slow, swaying gait. Concerned it might be a stranded traveler, Daniel slowed down and rolled down his window to ask if they needed help. But as his car approached, the figure turned toward him, revealing not a face, but a smooth, blank surface where one should have been. Startled, Daniel slammed on the brakes. In that instant, the figure dissolved into the desert air, vanishing without a sound. When he stepped out of the car to investigate, there were no footprints in the sand, no signs of anyone having walked there at all. Only the wind brushed through the sagebrush, whispering across the empty ground. But the faceless wanderers are not the only strange phenomenon on US 191. Equally unsettling are the reports of driverless vehicle cars that appear out of nowhere, gliding silently across the asphalt. Witnesses say these phantom vehicles are eerily smooth in their movement, as though they are floating above the ground rather than rolling across it. Some describe hearing no engine, no tire noise, not even the crunch of gravel when the vehicles drift onto the shoulder. They simply move, swift and silent, with an unnatural grace. A rancher named Teresa, who lives on remote land near the highway, once encountered one of these spectral vehicles during a late-night drive home. Her old truck was the only vehicle on the road, its headlights slicing through the desert darkness. Then, in her rearview mirror, she saw a pair of headlights bright, steady, and rapidly approaching. She gripped the wheel, preparing to be passed. But the headlights didn't behave like any normal car. They closed in too quickly, without the slightest sound. And when she glanced out her side window to see who was overtaking her, she saw a pale, shimmering car drifting silently past, with no one behind the wheel. The vehicle matched her speed for a moment, gliding effortlessly alongside her. Teresa said she felt a cold rush move through her truck, as though a winter wind had blown through the closed windows. Then, without warning, the phantom car swerved slightly and disappeared into the darkness ahead, its taillights fading until they were swallowed by the night. When Teresa reached the point where the car had vanished, she saw no sign of it, no tracks, no dust, no movement in the dunes beside the road. It was as if the vehicle had never existed. Some believe these ghostly cars are echoes of past tragedies. Over the decades, accidents along US 191 have claimed many lives, often due to the unpredictable desert weather and long, isolated stretches of highway. Locals whisper that the spirits of those who died on the road continue their final journeys, unaware that time has marched on without them. A group of campers once reported seeing something even more unusual. While driving back from a trip to Canyon de Chelly, they noticed a strange glow on the horizon. As they drew closer, they saw what looked like several vehicles moving in sync, headlights glowing dimly as they descended a nearby ridge. But the desert sand showed no tracks, and the vehicles made no sound. The campers watched in stunned silence as the lights drifted closer to the road, hovered briefly, and then faded like candle flames being snuffed out by the wind. Travelers who encountered the wandering figures or the driverless cars often report other strange sensations, as well, brief drops in temperature, the smell of dust and smoke, or the sensation of being watched from the darkened desert beyond the headlights. Some hear faint whispers, carried on the wind, hinting at old stories and unfinished journeys. Others feel a sudden wave of melancholy or dread, as though they have stepped momentarily into someone else's grief. The Navajo and Hopi communities, whose lands border parts of US 191, share cultural stories about spirits who walk the desert, travelers caught between this world and the next. They speak of the restless ones, souls who remain when their lives end abruptly or without closure. According to tradition, these spirits wander the roads at night, searching for peace or a way home. Some say the phantom vehicles are guided by these lost souls, while others believe the lights themselves are spirits taking the form of something familiar. Regardless of origin, the tales persist. Motorists passing through northern Arizona after dark continue to report sightings of the faceless figures wandering the sand and the silent cars gliding across the asphalt. For many, the encounters last only a momenta, glimpse in the mirror, or a shadow at the edge of the headlights. But the impact lingers long after the drive is over. US 191 remains a lonely stretch of desert highway, beautiful but eerie, quiet but never truly empty. Travelers who journey through it at night may feel they are alone, but the stories tell a different truth. In the shifting shadows and whispering winds, figures still walk, cars still glide, and echoes of the past still move through the desertry, reminding all who pass that some journeys never end. Occasionally, he would glance in his rearview mirror, only to see a figure reflected there that wasn't in the passenger seat. When he slowed down or looked directly at it, the figure vanished. This pattern repeated for several miles, leaving him tense, anxious, and questioning his own senses. Whispered warnings are another element frequently reported along this stretch of highway. Travelers have described hearing faint murmurs carried on the wind, soft, urgent voices that seem to speak directly to them. Sometimes the whispers caution them to slow down or pay attention to the road ahead. Other times, they are unintelligible, like fragments of sentences drifting from the cliffs themselves. The guide recalled hearing a quiet, insistent warning just before a sudden curve. A warning he could not fully understand, but felt compelled to heed. Moments later, a boulder sat precariously on the edge of the road, something he might have missed entirely had he not slowed down. Local lore suggests that the ghostly travelers are tied to the land's long history, when Native American legends of spirits and guardians of the earth intersect with more recent tragedies along the highway. In the 20th century, accidents occurred along the steep curves of 179, claiming lives of both locals and visitors. Some believe that the figures are echoes of those who met untimely ends, unable to leave the region and forever walking the overlooks they loved in life. Others suggest they are spirits guiding travelers away from danger. Their intermittent appearances a way of ensuring that drivers remain cautious along the sharp turns and narrow shoulders. One evening, a photographer driving to a remote overlook to capture the sunset reported a particularly eerie encounter. As she ascended the switchbacks, she noticed movement just beyond the guardrail. Two shadowy figures appeared, seeming to walk alongside her car, their shapes flickering as if struggling to remain solid. The headlights illuminated faint glimpses of their forms, but whenever she slowed or attempted to get a better view, they melted back into the darkness. When she finally reached her destination, she turned to look back down the road and saw the shadows again, this time at a curve farther below, watching her ascend. She said she felt a quiet urgency in their presence, as though they were silently guiding her forward, ensuring she did not stumble or misstep on the winding path. Other travelers have reported sensations of being followed even when no figures are visible. A solitary hiker driving late at night recounted hearing footsteps alongside the vehicle, but each time he looked, the road was empty. Occasionally, a cold breeze would drift through the cabin, carrying the faint scent of pine and earth, as if the canyon itself were breathing. Some drivers even claimed to feel a presence leaning close, a watchful companion riding along without ever sitting in the seat beside them. State Route 179 remains a popular destination for daytime travelers, admired for its beauty and accessibility. But for those who traverse it after sunset, the road takes on an uncanny life of its own. The red rocks cast long, dark shadows, the trees sway with whispered voices, and the overlooks become stages for ghostly travelers, forever moving in patterns unseen during the daylight hours. Those who encounter these phenomena rarely speak of them publicly, wary of disbelief, yet the stories persist passed from one visitor to another, quietly acknowledged by locals who know the highway carries memories, warnings, and wandering souls. For anyone driving State Route 179 after dark, the experience is more than just a journey through the scenic desert. It becomes a passage through a landscape alive with echoes, shadowy travelers appearing along overlooks, whispered warnings carried on the wind, and ghostly figures following vehicles only to vanish when approached. In the silent stretches of asphalt winding between Sedona and Oak Creek, it is impossible to forget the feeling that the land is watching, and that some travelers, though long gone, still walk beside the road. Drivers often describe seeing headlights approaching from the opposite direction or even behind them, only to find the road empty when they glance directly. These encounters are often paired with a strange sense of isolation, as if the Grand Canyon itself has absorbed every sound and left only the unnatural motion of the spectral vehicle. One of the most chilling stories comes from a group of tourists returning to their lodge after a sunset hike. Driving slowly along a bend in the road, they saw what appeared to be a lone figure standing near a guardrail. The person waved at them, as if signaling for help, and one of the group, a young man named Tom, rolled down his window to ask if they were okay. As soon as he did, the figure disappeared completely. Moments later, another figure appeared at a different overlook, far ahead, repeating the same motion. They described the experience as a series of glimpses into another reality, a shadow world existing just parallel to their own. Local lore suggests several possible explanations for these phenomena. Some attribute the phantom tourists and vehicles to tragic accidents that occurred over the decades along the canyon rim. But the spirits of those who died may linger, endlessly replaying the moments before their deaths, frozen in time or attempting to interact with living travelers. Whispers often accompany these spectral appearances, subtle at first and barely audible over the wind that sweeps through the canyon. Some describe hearing their own names called, or the echo of laughter that chills the spine rather than comforts it. The whispers frequently coincide with sightings of ghostly vehicles or tourists, reinforcing the feeling that the canyon is not empty at all. These reports suggest that the phenomena are not confined to tourists or casual travelers. They are consistent across many accounts, lending weight to the idea that State Route 64 holds something unusual, something beyond natural explanation. The road remains a heavily traveled artery of the Grand Canyon area, linking major overlooks and lodges. Daytime visitors rarely notice anything out of the ordinary, their attention absorbed by the sheer natural beauty surrounding them. But for those driving at dusk or during the long stretches of night, the highway transforms. Shadows move differently, the air feels heavier, and the spectral figures appear with a consistency that is impossible to ignore. Many travelers learn to drive cautiously, aware that a figure or a phantom vehicle might appear at any curve, at any overlook, lingering just at the edge of perception. State Route 64 is a testament to the grandeur of the Grand Canyon, but also to its mysteries. Those who drive its curves after dark often find themselves witnesses to something beyond the ordinary. Phantom tourists frozen at overlooks, cars gliding silently across the asphalt, and shadowy travelers who vanish before they can be reached. The canyon, vast and echoing, seems to hold these spirits within its cliffs, a silent audience to the ongoing flow of human life. And for those who pass through at night, the highway becomes more than a road. It becomes a corridor through memory and shadow, a place where the living and the lost brush against one another, fleetingly in the dim glow of headlights and the quiet expanse of the desert sky. Interstate 10, stretching across the heart of Arizona, from Tucson to Phoenix, is a lifeline of the desert. Long, straight stretches of asphalt, flanked by cacti, mesquite trees, and the jagged outlines of distant mountains. By day, it is a bustling highway filled with commuters, freight trucks, and travelers making their way across the Sonoran Desert. But after sunset, the road transforms. Locals speak in hushed tones of strange occurrences that seem to defy explanation. Ghostly headlights racing alongside cars, phantom travelers standing in median strips, and shadows that vanish the moment a driver approaches. The most common phenomenon involves ghostly vehicles that appear without warning. They glide alongside cars as if riding on some invisible plane, perfectly in sync, and then disappear without a trace when the driver dares to look directly. State Route 377, winding through the remote stretches of eastern Arizona, is a road of solitude and quiet beauty. The highway cuts through rugged desert landscapes, dotted with mesas, scrub brush, and the occasional abandoned homestead. By day, travelers admire the endless horizon, the sun-bleached rocks, and the stark contrast between the earth and sky. But after nightfall, the road transforms into something altogether different. Locals and night travelers alike report eerie encounters along this stretch. Shadowy hitchhikers appearing beside the asphalt, cold drafts sweeping through vehicles, and the unsettling sense of being followed by unseen presences. The most common reports involve shadowy figures standing at the side of the road, often just beyond the shoulder. They appear to be hitchhikers, raising their hands as if requesting a ride, but their appearance is always fleeting. Some are described as thin and tall, their forms blurred, almost transparent, while others are vaguely human-shaped, dressed in clothing that seems outdated or out of place for the desert night. Witnesses consistently note that when they stop or slow down to offer assistance, the figures vanish, leaving nothing behind, not a footprint, not a whisper, nothing but the silent desert stretching into darkness. One traveler, a young man named Marcus, recounted his experience driving north toward Holbrook late one summer evening. The highway was quiet, save for the soft hum of his tires on the asphalt. As he rounded a curve, he noticed a figure standing beside the road, illuminated briefly by his headlights. Marcus slowed, thinking it might be someone stranded or in need of help. The figure lifted an arm in what seemed like a wave. Marcus blinked, and when he looked again, the figure was gone. He stopped the car, stepped out, and searched the shoulder. But there were no tracks in the dust, no indication that anyone had been there. He returned to his car, shaken, noticing a sudden chill that had not been there before. The air inside the vehicle felt icy, though the outside temperature was mild. Another common element of the reports is the sensation of being followed. Many drivers report feeling an unseen presence riding with them, especially on long stretches of open road where there is little to distract from the desert's emptiness. Sometimes, it manifests as a cold draft sweeping through the vehicle, brushing past the driver and passengers despite all windows being fully closed. Others describe hearing faint footsteps behind them, soft enough to be mistaken for wind or the car itself, yet persistent enough to suggest someone or something is moving in tandem with their vehicle. A woman named Lydia, traveling alone along the route on her way to a late-night shift in Sholo, experienced the following sensation. She had just passed a desolate stretch of road when she felt a sudden chill envelop the cabin of her car. At first, she assumed the air conditioning had malfunctioned. Moments later, she noticed a shadow flit past the rearview mirror just beyond the back seat. When she turned to look, the seat was empty, the car silent except for her own breathing. The chill remained, accompanied by a sense that someone or something was still there, moving silently in the shadows. She drove cautiously, glancing in mirrors repeatedly, but the feeling persisted until she reached the city lights, where the warmth and noise seemed to dispel the presence. Local folklore provides some explanations for these spectral encounters. Many believe the shadowy hitchhikers are spirits of those who met untimely deaths along the highway, travelers who perished in accidents, pioneers who never reached their destination, or settlers whose lives ended abruptly in the unforgiving desert. The cold drafts and sense of being followed are often interpreted as remnants of these spirits, trying to make their presence known to the living, or perhaps continuing the journeys they could not complete in life. Some residents say the desert has a way of holding onto memories, and that the highway serves as a corridor where these lingering echoes occasionally intersect with the world of the living. A group of friends driving late one night recounted seeing multiple figures along a particularly isolated stretch of State Route 377. One appeared to be an elderly man, leaning on a cane, another a young woman, holding her arm as if injured, and a third, a child, motionless at the edge of the road. As the car drew closer, each figure vanished one by one, leaving the road utterly empty. The friends noted that the temperature inside the vehicle had dropped suddenly, their breath visible in the glow of the dashboard lights. They continued driving in silence, uneasy, feeling as though unseen eyes were tracking their progress down the highway. Some travelers claim that the highway itself seems aware, its curves, dips, and stretches of open desert, acting as conduits for the strange phenomena. Drivers moving too quickly often report more intense encounters, while those who slow down or drive cautiously seem to experience fleeting glimpses rather than prolonged contact. The shadowy figures appear intermittently, as if choosing moments to reveal themselves before slipping away, while the cold drafts and sensation of being followed persist long after the visual sightings have ended. Even locals who drive the route regularly at night admit to feeling a peculiar tension along the highway. The road is essential for connecting towns, but it is also a place where ordinary reality feels suspended. The desert, quiet and empty, becomes alive with the echoes of those who never left. Their presence detectable in fleeting glimpses and sensations that defy explanation. State Route 377 is more than just a highway through eastern Arizona. It is a place where the past lingers, where travelers may encounter shadowy figures standing silently at the roadside, sense unseen companions moving with them, and feel sudden, unnatural cold inside their vehicles. For those driving this remote stretch at night, the road becomes a corridor through memory and shadow, where fleeting visions and ghostly sensations remind them that the desert is never truly empty, and some travelers living or not continue to walk its lonely paths. State Route 260, cutting through the heart of Arizona's rim country, is a highway that winds through dense pine forests, deep canyons, and expansive high desert plateaus. By day, it is a scenic route prized for its breathtaking vistas, wildlife sightings, and access to the Mogollon Rim's trails and overlooks. But as night falls, the highway takes on an unsettling quality. Those who travel its deserted stretches after sunset report ghostly occurrences, phantom travelers standing by guardrails, cries echoing from the forest, and shadows that vanish the instant a car slows or approaches. These tales have persisted for decades, whispered among locals and recounted by travelers who swear the road is alive with something unseen. The most frequent reports describe figures standing near guardrails, silhouetted by the dim glow of headlights. They often appear suddenly, just around a curve or atop a ridge, motionless yet unmistakably human in form. Some seem to be waiting for assistance, raising an arm as if signaling for help, while others simply stand, staring into the darkness. Witnesses consistently note that the figures are fleeting as soon as a vehicle slows or someone steps out to investigate. The travelers disappear, vanishing into the shadows as if they had never been there at all. In some cases, the spot where the figure stood shows no footprints or other evidence of human presence. One account comes from a man named Gerald, driving northbound toward Heber late one October night. The highway was empty, the forest surrounding him silent, except for the soft hum of his tires on the asphalt. As he rounded a bend, his headlights revealed a solitary figure standing at the edge of a guardrail, its back to him. Gerald slowed, concerned it might be someone stranded or injured. The sounds are fleeting, often indistinct, and sometimes just on the edge of perception. Drivers have reported hearing whispers or calls that vanish when the windows are rolled down, leaving only the echo of their own fear behind. Some describe hearing the faint sounds of footsteps crunching on gravel or pine needles beside the road. But each time they look, the path is empty. Local legends often attempt to explain these sightings. Many believe the phantom travelers are spirits of those who perished along the rim country roads. Before modern safety measures, accidents were common along these winding highways. Vehicles skidded off guardrails, drivers lost control on sharp curves, and some never reached their destinations. The stories suggest that these spirits linger, replaying their final moments or reaching out to the living in search of help. Others speculate that the forest and high desert absorb residual energy from these tragedies, manifesting as shadowy figures and ethereal sounds that appear and vanish at will. In addition to individual encounters, some drivers report a general sense of unease on the most isolated stretches of the highway. A lone motorist might feel eyes upon them, even when no other vehicles are in sight. The temperature inside the vehicle can drop suddenly, and a subtle, persistent chill follows drivers along corners and inclines. Occasionally, the faint sound of movement rustling branches or scuffing footsteps accompanies the feeling, adding to the sense that the road itself is alive with echoes from the past. A group of teenagers camping near the Mogollon Rim recalled driving along State Route 260 late at night when they noticed multiple figures standing near guardrails along a deserted stretch. Each figure appeared momentarily, vanishing the instant they slowed the car to get a better look. Some emitted faint cries, which the teens described as pleading or desperate. The experience left a lasting impression, instilling a mix of fear and awe, as though the forest and highway were showing them a world just beyond perception. Despite these unsettling stories, State Route 260 remains a vital link for residents and travelers moving between towns like Payson, Heberovagard, and the surrounding rim country communities. Phantom travelers linger by guardrails, cries for help echo through the pine forests, and shadows follow vehicles before disappearing into the darkness. The road is empty, yet not entirely so. The past is always present along the rim country stretches of 260, reminding travelers that some souls never leave, some moments never end, and some roads hold secrets that cannot be ignored. S93, stretching across the Arizona desert from Wickenburg to Kingman, is a highway that cuts through wide expanses of sand, sagebrush, and rugged hills. By day, it is a long, open road, favored by truckers, commuters, and travelers making the journey between the Phoenix metropolitan area and northern Arizona. State Route 89B, winding through the remote desert landscapes between Fredonia, Arizona, and Kanab, Utah, is a highway of vast, open horizons, rugged mesas, and stretches of road that seem endless under the desert sky. By day, the highway offers travelers stunning views of red rock cliffs, sandstone canyons, and the wide, empty spaces of the Colorado Plateau. But after nightfall, State Route 89B takes on a far more unsettling character. Visitors recount seeing spectral travelers crossing the road, vehicles appearing in mirrors with no one behind the wheel, and eerie whispers that seem to follow them along the asphalt. State Route 64A, winding through the Grand Canyon, South Rim, offers breathtaking views of one of the most iconic landscapes in the world. During the day, it is a corridor of natural splendor, where visitors stop at overlooks to marvel at the sheer cliffs, the meandering Colorado River far below, and the vibrant layers of rock that tell a story millions of years in the making. Yet as the sun sets and the crowds thin, the highway transforms into a place of eerie stillness. These strange occurrences have earned State Route 6 a reputation for encounters that blur the line between the natural and the supernatural. The most frequently reported phenomena involve shadowy figures near the overlooks. Travelers describe hikers who seem perfectly human at first glance, standing or walking along the rim, but whose details fade when approached. Their forms are often blurred, indistinct, as if they are partially transparent or phasing in and out of reality. Some stand silently, gazing out over the canyon, while others appear to move along the edge as if retracing steps taken long ago. State Route 188, running along the shores of Roosevelt Lake in central Arizona, is a highway that cuts through rugged desert hills, winding along steep cliffs, and offering breathtaking views of water shimmering beneath towering cliffs. By day, it is a peaceful route, popular with tourists, anglers, and locals seeking a scenic drive along the lake. Yet as the sun sets, the road takes on an entirely different character. As he rounded a curve near a rocky bluff, a figure appeared in the middle of the lane. Aaron slammed on the brakes, but when he looked again, the traveler was gone. Then, from somewhere along the roadside, he heard a soft whisper, barely audible, urging him to turn back before disappearing into the night. In some accounts, the drafts move with the car, shifting as if a presence is moving along the cabin. Many drivers who experience this phenomenon report that it coincides with sightings of shadowy travelers or the soft whispers that echo along the highway. Whispers and voices are another unsettling feature of State Route 188 at night. Drivers describe faint murmurs, unintelligible phrases, or urgent calls that seem to come from the surrounding desert, the lake, or even from inside the vehicle itself. Some report hearing their own names called, or phrases urging them to stop or turn back. These sounds often appear just as shadowy figures emerge or disappear, reinforcing the impression that the road is not merely a stretch of asphalt, but a corridor where the living and the unseen intersect. Local folklore provides explanations that intertwine history, tragedy, and superstition. The area around Roosevelt Lake has a long history of human activity, from indigenous settlements to early pioneers, miners, and travelers navigating the rugged terrain. Accidents and disappearances along State Route 188 are well documented, particularly on the narrow, winding stretches near the cliffs and lake. Many believe that the shadowy travelers are the spirits of those who met untimely deaths along the road, lingering to warn or guide those who pass after dark. The cold drafts and whispers are thought to be manifestations of these spirits, attempts to communicate or influence the living from beyond the veil. As they slowed, faint whispers seemed to come from the desert hillside, urging them to take caution. When they looked again, the figure was gone, leaving only the empty road and the reflective surface of the lake below. The experience left them shaken, with a lingering sense that the highway itself was alive with memories. Cautioning and observing those who traveled its path. Even those familiar with the road admit that driving State Route 188 at night requires vigilance. Many locals advise keeping speed moderate and lights high, not only for safety, but also to navigate the unpredictable presence of the supernatural. Despite the reports, the road remains a vital link for travelers, commuters, and outdoor enthusiasts, combining practical utility with a mysterious, haunting allure that draws stories and legends from all who traverse it after dark. State Route 188 along Roosevelt Lake is more than a highway. It is a place where the desert and water meet in isolation, and where the past seems to linger just beneath the surface. Shadowy travelers appear suddenly along the road, cold drafts sweep through vehicles, and whispers echo from the lake and cliffs, urging caution and commanding attention. The highway becomes a liminal space, where the living brush against the spectral, where the desert's silence is filled with murmurs and movement, and where every bend in the road holds the possibility of an encounter that defies explanation. State Route 64B, winding along the north rim of the Grand Canyon, is a highway that offers breathtaking vistas by day and eerie, unsettling experiences by night. During daylight hours, it is a route of majestic scenery. Steep cliffs drop dramatically into the canyon. Forests of ponderosa pine stretch across plateaus, and the Colorado River winds far below, carving its path through the rock over millennia. The most common reports involve phantom travelers appearing suddenly along the highway. One night, a visitor named Jessica was driving north along State Route 64B. After sunset, the road was empty, and the only sound was the hum of her tires on asphalt. As she rounded a curve near a cliffside overlook, she noticed a figure standing in the middle of the road. Jessica slammed on the brakes, her heart racing, but when she glanced again, the figure had disappeared. Moments later, she heard the soft crunch of footsteps behind her, echoing across the asphalt, though there was no one visible. Then, carried on a sudden gust of wind, came a faint whisper, "Turn back, be careful." The combination of the figure, footsteps, and whisper left her shaken, and she later described the experience as if she had crossed into a space where the past and present were intertwined. Footsteps on the asphalt are a recurring phenomenon reported by travelers. Many describe hearing the sound of shoes crunching on gravel or the rhythmic tap of steps on the pavement. Even when driving alone, the footsteps often match the speed of a vehicle, sometimes following closely, sometimes appearing ahead, only to vanish when the driver slows or stops. These phantom steps are accompanied by a sensation of being watched or followed, creating an uneasy awareness that the road is not entirely empty. Some travelers have reported that the footsteps continue for several minutes, seemingly independent of their own movements, before abruptly ceasing. Whispers carried by the wind are another feature of the North Rim's haunted highway. Drivers describe faint murmurs, often unintelligible, that seem to drift across the canyon or along the roadside. Some report hearing their names called or phrases warning them to slow down, stop, or turn back. These whispers often coincide with sightings of phantom travelers or the sound of footsteps, reinforcing the impression that the highway is alive with unseen presences. Many who experience the whispers describe a feeling that the canyon itself holds memories, replaying fragments of lives long past. For anyone traveling the road at night, local lore offers potential explanations for these encounters. The North Rim has a history of human presence dating back to indigenous peoples, early explorers, and settlers navigating the challenging terrain. The highway itself winds through cliffs, plateaus, and steep drop-offs, areas where accidents and tragedies have occurred over the years. Travelers who venture along this highway at night are confronted with the uncanny, caught between the beauty of the canyon and the mysterious presence that lingers there. The road becomes a space where memory and shadow intermingle, where the living brush against remnants of the past, and where every curve and overlook holds the possibility of an encounter that defies explanation. For anyone driving State Route 64B after dark, the North Rim is never truly empty, and some travelers, though unseen, continue to traverse its winding stretches under the silent gaze of the canyon cliffs. S-191, running through the remote desert landscapes near Alpine, Arizona, is a highway that stretches for miles across arid plains, rugged hills, and open skies that seem endless. By day, it is a quiet, scenic route, offering travelers the beauty of towering cacti, jagged rock formations, and the distant outlines of mountains. Yet, as night falls, this remote highway transforms into a place of unsettling mystery. Shadowy hitchhikers appear along isolated stretches. Phantom trucks materialize with no driver behind the wheel, and strange spectral lights flash across the desert sky. These phenomena have given US 191 a reputation as one of the eeriest roads in the region. a corridor where the natural world intersects with something inexplicably supernatural. The most frequently reported encounters involve shadowy hitchhikers appearing on the highway. Drivers often describe seeing figures standing along the shoulder, silhouetted against a fading light or the darkness of night. At first glance, they appear human, often dressed in clothes that seem outdated or unusual for the area. And they may raise a hand as if seeking a ride when approached or when the vehicle slows. However, the figures vanish completely, leaving no footprints in the gravel or sand. Many witnesses describe an overwhelming feeling of being watched or followed, as if the figures exist just outside the limits of the visible world, aware of the living passing by on the road. One driver, Michael, recounted a chilling encounter late one October evening while traveling south toward Alpine. The highway was empty, and the only light came from his headlights cutting through the darkness. As he rounded a bend in a narrow stretch of road, he saw a figure standing in the center of the lane. He braked sharply, heart pounding, only to watch as the hitchhiker dissolved into the desert shadows. Moments later, the rumble of a truck's engine echoed in the distance, though no vehicle was visible. Michael later described a sudden chill filling his car, as if the desert air itself had turned cold, and a faint flash of light illuminated the sky above, briefly revealing shapes that defied explanation. Phantom trucks are another phenomenon reported along US 191. Drivers described large vehicles appearing in the distance or in their mirrors, moving along the highway without headlights or drivers. These trucks often seem to float or drift slightly, as if unbound by gravity, and they emit the deep, metallic hum of an engine that is eerily realistic. When approached, these trucks vanish suddenly, leaving only the empty road behind. In addition to shadowy figures and phantom vehicles, spectral lights are frequently reported flashing across the desert sky. Travelers describe bursts of illumination, sometimes hovering just above the horizon, other times streaking across the night like fleeting comets. These lights appear without warning, often coinciding with sightings of phantom trucks or hitchhikers. Witnesses frequently report that the lights do not behave like normal vehicles or stars, appearing and disappearing instantaneously, or moving in patterns that defy logic. Some believe these lights are tied to the same mysterious forces that animate the highway's spectral travelers, acting as signals or markers in the desert night. Local folklore and history provide possible explanations for these unusual occurrences. The area around Alpine has long been a corridor for travelers, prospectors, and truckers, and the remote terrain has seen its share of accidents, vehicle breakdowns, and disappearances. Many believe that the shadowy hitchhikers are spirits of those who perished along the highway, returning to warn or interact with those who travel the road at night. Phantom trucks may be echoes of fatal accidents, replaying the sounds and movements of vehicles lost in the desert. The spectral lights, some say, are manifestations of energy left behind by these events, visible only to those traveling in the quiet solitude of night. Several travelers report encounters that combine multiple phenomena. A group driving northbound late at night describes seeing a figure step onto the highway from the desert shoulder. As they swerved to avoid it, the deep hum of a truck engine echoed nearby, though the lane was empty. Simultaneously, a sudden flash of light illuminated the desert sky, revealing the faint outline of a vehicle or structure that vanished moments later. The combination of figure, sound, and light left the group shaken, and they later recalled a sensation that time had stretched, as though the road had opened a window to another world layered over the familiar desert. Even locals familiar with US 191 acknowledge its unsettling reputation after dark. The highways, isolated stretches, minimal traffic, and vast open landscapes create an environment where the smallest movement, sound, or flicker of light can feel amplified. Drivers are advised to remain alert, keep headlights bright, and approach the road with caution. Despite these precautions, encounters with shadowy figures, phantom trucks, and unexplained lights remain unpredictable, reinforcing the highway's aura of mystery and the sense that something unseen roams the desert night. State US 191 near Alpine is more than a simple highway. It is a space where the desert, history, and the unexplained converge, Shadowy hitchhikers appear suddenly on isolated stretches. Phantom trucks drift silently along the asphalt, and spectral lights flash across the desert sky, defying explanation. Travelers who journey along this road after nightfall are confronted with the uncanny, caught between the familiar and the unknown. The highway becomes a corridor where echoes of past travelers linger, where time and space seem altered, and where the desert itself holds secrets that are visible only in brief, haunting glimpses. For anyone venturing along US 191 at night, the road is never truly empty, and some travelers, whether lost to time or unseen by the living, continue to roam its lonely expanse under the watchful desert sky. State Route 180, running through the southern reaches of Grand Canyon National Park, is a road that weaves through dense forests, rocky plateaus, and breathtaking vistas overlooking one of the world's most awe-inspiring natural wonders. By day, the highway is filled with the hum of tourists, park vehicles, and travelers stopping to take in the sweeping views. But as night falls, the road transforms into something far more mysterious. Visitors report ghostly hikers crossing the asphalt, phantom vehicles that seem to follow their cars, and an unsettling silence that descends after the figures vanish. These experiences have contributed to a long-standing reputation for State Route 180 as a place where the natural beauty of the Grand Canyon is entwined with the supernatural. The most common phenomena involve ghostly hikers appearing suddenly on the highway. Drivers describe figures stepping from the shadows near the roadside or emerging from trails leading into the forest. At first glance, these hikers appear ordinary, carrying backpacks or wearing jackets suited for hiking, but when approached, their forms seem to shimmer or fade, leaving no trace of their present snow footprints. No disturbed gravel, nothing to indicate they were ever there. Many travelers describe a profound sense of unease when encountering these figures, a feeling that they are being watched, and that the figures have a purpose beyond simply crossing the road. One visitor, Mark, shared a particularly unsettling experience while driving west along the highway late one October evening. The road was nearly empty, illuminated only by his headlights and the faint glow of the moon above. Around a curve, he saw a lone figure walking across the lane. He slowed, waiting for the hiker to reach the shoulder, but as he continued, he realized the figure had disappeared. Moments later, Mark noticed headlights in his rearview mirror, approaching rapidly. He slowed to let the vehicle pass, but it too vanished before reaching him, leaving only a cold, eerie silence behind. He later described the experience as if the road itself had shifted into a liminal space where reality and the supernatural overlapped. Phantom vehicles are another frequently reported occurrence along State Route 180. Drivers describe cars that appear in mirrors or on the road ahead, moving with precision and speed, yet producing no sound or visible signs of occupancy. When drivers attempt to confront them or slow down to see who might be inside, the cars vanish entirely, leaving only empty road and a lingering sense of being pursued. Many who experience this phenomenon describe a heightened awareness of their surroundings, a tension that seems to stretch time and amplify every sound and shadow along the highway. The eerie combination of ghostly hikers and phantom vehicles is often accompanied by a silence that is deeply unsettling. Travelers describe a sudden quiet that seems to descend when the figures vanish, the wind dropping, wildlife noises fading, and even the hum of their own engines sounding muffled. This quiet intensifies the sense of isolation, as though the road and surrounding forests are holding their breath. The effect is disorienting, leaving visitors with a lingering impression that the canyon itself is aware, observing every movement along its asphalt corridors. Local lore suggests that these phenomena may be tied to the history of the park and the surrounding area. Grand Canyon National Park has long been a place of human activity. From Native American settlements to early explorers and modern tourists, trails leading into the forest and along the rim have witnessed accidents, disappearances, and even fatal falls over the decades. Many believe that the ghostly hikers are spirits replaying their final journeys, appearing to remind travelers of the dangers that have claimed lives along these paths. Phantom vehicles may be echoes of park visitors or rangers long gone, still moving along the road in spectral form. Several travelers report encounters that combine multiple elements of these supernatural experiences. One couple driving eastbound late at night saw a hiker step onto the asphalt from a forested area. As they slowed, headlights appeared behind them, moving in tandem with their car. When they looked directly at the lights, the vehicle vanished, and the hiker was gone as well. In the moments that followed, the road felt charged with an almost palpable presence, a sense that something unseen was observing and perhaps guiding them along their journey. The combination of visual and auditory phenomena, followed by an eerie silence, left them shaken yet fascinated by the mysterious energy of the highway. Even park rangers and locals acknowledge that State Route 1080 has a reputation after dark. Several have reported seeing figures near trailheads or along stretches of road where accidents once occurred, hearing the hum of engines with no source, or feeling sudden shifts in temperature that coincide with phantom sightings. While documentation is often anecdotal, the consistency of reports over the years suggests that the highway holds a persistent and unexplained energy, one that manifests under the cover of darkness when travelers are most vulnerable and alert. Driving State Route 180 at night requires heightened caution, not just because of the winding roads and elevation changes, but because of the unexplained phenomena that continue to be reported. Travelers are advised to maintain speed control, keep headlights bright, and remain aware of their surroundings, as even familiar stretches of road can yield moments that defy explanation. The combination of shadowy hikers, phantom vehicles, and silence creates a unique and unsettling experience, blending the natural grandeur of the Grand Canyon with encounters that seem drawn from legend and folklore. State Route 180 through Grand Canyon National Park is more than a highway. It is a corridor where the beauty of the natural world meets the spectral echoes of the past. Ghostly hikers cross the asphalt, phantom vehicles follow unseen, and silence descends with an intensity that amplifies every movement and sound. For travelers at night, the road becomes a liminal space where reality feels thin and the unseen is ever present. Each curve, trailhead, and overlook holds the potential for an encounter that defies explanation, reminding visitors that the Grand Canyon is not only a place of remarkable vistas, but also a landscape alive with lingering memories, shadows, and whispers that continue to traverse the highway long after the sun has set. State Route 89, winding through the heart of the Navajo Nation, stretches across vast desert plains, red rock formations, and remote canyons. Even locals who regularly travel the highway acknowledge its eerie reputation. Many advise drivers to be vigilant, maintain speed control, and respect the remote stretches, particularly after dark. Despite the warnings, State Route 89 remains an essential corridor through the Navajo Nation, connecting communities, travelers, and the natural wonders of northern Arizona. Phantom travelers wander along the asphalt. Headlights appear and vanish without explanation, and whispered voices recount tragedies that occurred decades ago. Travelers who ignore the warnings risk joining the spectral procession, wandering the endless highway alongside spirits who have been trapped for generations. The road becomes a corridor between the living and the dead, a space where memory, shadow, and history collide. For anyone daring to travel State Route 89 at night, the highway is never truly empty, and some travelers, unseen by the living, continue to move along its lonely stretches, guided only by the whispers of the desert wind and the spectral travelers who roam its darkened expanse. These are the haunted highways of Arizona, where phantom travelers drift silently. Ghostly vehicles appear with no drivers, and whispers echo across the desert night. Each highway carries a history of tragedy, unexplained disappearances, and spirits who refuse to rest. If you ever find yourself driving these roads after dark, keep your eyes open. Headlights may not belong to the living, shadows may follow your car, and the wind may carry voices calling your name. The past lingers here, alive in ways that the living cannot fully understand. Thank you for exploring Arizona's haunted highways with me. Stay cautious, stay curious, and always respect the spirits who wander these roads, continuing journeys that will never truly end.